I was having your boy Rico from RicoScores, and there's a very interesting report saying that there are some offensive players from the Washington Commanders that will not endorse Eric Bieniemy as far as the next head coaching search, which also just solidifies again. It just further backs the fact that Ron Rivera is out of here. I mean, the fact that even players are aware of this, like whoever the next coach is going to be, they don't necessarily prefer for it to be Eric Bieniemy. That doesn't necessarily mean that they just absolutely hate Eric Bieniemy, or maybe it does, but it means that he is not going to get a ringing endorsement from a lot of the important offensive players. I'm assuming from the sources that this came from, this had to be important offensive players. They wouldn't just ask like a fifth string offensive lineman what they think about Eric Bieniemy. This has to be some of the more notable names, and it's really interesting that, you know, they've done a good job of keeping everything anonymous. But again, this just further backs the fact that Ron Rivera is definitely gone. So many different things are pointing to that. Reports about how Josh Harris feels, Eugene Shin being so analytically based and all of that type of stuff, which you'll see in that breakdown that's coming out on my birthday, November 30th, this upcoming Thursday, and why him and Ron Rivera would never even be able to coexist. But this is crazy though, and the only reason I'm even talking about this is because it came from sources like Grant Paulsen and John Keim. If this was just a random report that I saw like on Twitter from some random person or like on Instagram, shouts out to all of the Commanders pages doing it, but I'll see reports appear on some of those other Commanders pages and I'll be ready to make a video, and then later on it'll come out that like that was never true, or I'll never see anybody else talk about it, or something even completely opposite will be reported within the next couple of days. So I've already learned to not even bite for the certain things like that. I'm not sure if people are clickbaiting on purpose or not, but just for whatever reason, I just need to stick to, if John Keim says it, John Keim and Nikki Javala, then there's something really to that, because those two guys I can trust, and Grant Paulsen I trust a little bit too as well, but John Keim and Nikki Javala, I literally feel like if they report it, there's some real smoke and build up and steam behind this thing. There's some real motion going on when they report something, because John Keim and Nikki Javala are not the type of reporters that are trying to be first. They care the most about being very accurate and not looking crazy when they report something and something else is said. So John Keim said on his podcast, Grant Paulsen said on the radio, that Washington Commanders offensive players do not plan on endorsing Eric Bieniemy with Josh Harris's next head coaching search. Now, of course, I would love for the GM to be involved. I'm pretty sure Eugene Shin is going to be involved as well, but that's really interesting. Now, you know, we're going to take a look at a lot of stuff like that report with players are saying about him, the exact quotes from the sources and stuff like that. And also I want to dive into some stats, some interesting stats for Eric Bieniemy to help his case and also hurt his case. We'll do the brief hurt his case in the beginning. Then we're going to have like a nice mixed bag revolved around Sam Howell and the good and the bad with Sam Howell. And then we're going to have just some purely good stats to help his case and why he could potentially be our next head coach or just stay as an offensive coordinator, whatever. And so we're going to do and dive into all, and also we got to provide some fair excuses to why Eric Bieniemy hasn't been as successful as a lot of us hoped he'd be. A lot of it's still definitely on him, but he has some reasonable excuses when you put it in perspective as to why this year didn't end up being what we expected. But before we dive into all of that, I really apologize for the long intro. But make sure y'all stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Now, hopefully by the time I put out this video, John Keim and Grant Paulsen don't come out of nowhere and apologize and say that they heard wrong or something like that. I'm rooting for Eric Bieniemy, even though Ben Johnson is my favorite choice. I am rooting for Eric Bieniemy, so I'm hoping that these reports aren't true, but it's looking like it probably is, just based on, again, who the sources are. But make sure y'all stay tuned, because I'm coming with daily content, everything revolving around Commanders. I have so many video ideas that when things like this happen, it just pushes my video ideas back another day. And again, make sure you be on the lookout for that premiere at 3 p.m. The Eugene Shin breakdown, full breakdown, every way that he wants to build this team, how he's going to use analytics, which positions he prioritizes, how he feels about going forward on fourth downs, 2-point conversions, all of that type of stuff. Does the running back position matter? Is the tight end position really important to an offense? Is he pass first, run first? All of that type of stuff. I do a full breakdown of his presentation and how he builds team, his track record, where he's been successful at with other teams, how he's impacted other teams, and how he'll potentially impact ours. So I have so much content coming out. that Eugene Shin video that I just spoke about for like the past 30 seconds, again, coming out on my birthday, November 30th, 3 p.m. is going to be a premiere, so I'm going to pull up and watch it with y'all. And yeah, man, again, be on the lookout for so much more content. Without further ado, sorry for the long intro again. Let's get it.
He's our quarterback for the 5-10 years, and I truly believe that.
All right, so the first time I saw it, I saw a tweet from 1067 The Fan, and I know we don't typically trust them with anything because they just seem like they're just straight up burgundy and gold haters no matter who it is. Dan Snyder deserved it, but all these other people don't. I don't know what's going on. But they tweeted, Grant Paulsen has heard the Commanders' offensive players wouldn't give Eric Bieniemy a ringing endorsement to be the next head coach. Quote, I'm not sure his style works in today's NFL as we think it might, unquote. And that quote came from Grant Paulsen, which is very interesting. And then he went on to say during the whole interview that he had on the radio, quote, I continue to hear that if this is up to the players, if they are counseled in any way, they will not be glowing endorsements by and large for Eric Bieniemy from the guys on the offense. So, but again, that's if the players have any say, and that's a good point that Grant Paulsen brings up in his quote. That's if Josh Harris even takes the players' opinions into account. Maybe he will. It's quite likely that he doesn't. Most owners don't ask the players who they want to hire as a head coach. Maybe they'll, get a feel for, okay, we're thinking about hiring this guy. How do you feel about that? But I don't think they're just going to go to the players first and be like, give me a list of the head coaches you want and stuff like that. Highly doubt it goes that way, but that would be really interesting. I would like it if he got as much input from the players as he could, especially cornerstone franchise guys, but we'll see, because you never know. Maybe nobody's a franchise guy in Josh Harris's eyes. I mean, it feels like he's about to clean house, and you never know. Even as much as we love Terry McLaurin, Samuel Cosmi, Brian Robinson, a lot of these guys, nothing's a 100% sure fact thing that any of these guys are going to be a part of the burgundy and gold future. The next GM, head coach, defensive coordinator may just come in and completely clean house of everybody. I doubt somebody like a Terry McLaurin would go, but you never know, man. So I would still love it if he got some of the players' input on it. But again, if the players have any say, it's being reported to Grant Paulsen that the players will not give glowing endorsements. Now, again, it doesn't sound like they hate him, but it just sounds like, man, I mean, he's cool. You know what I'm saying? He's straight. You know what I'm saying? If you want to do it, cool. But it's not like they're just praying and hoping that Eric Bieniemy becomes our next head coach, which I was hoping would happen before this season started. I was hoping by the time we got around this time, when it's looking like Rivera's probably on the way out, we're looking for a next head coach, Eric Bieniemy will probably be the next guy up. I'm still rooting for him, but again, like I've already spoken on and said in a couple of videos now, if it's between Ben Johnson and Eric Bieniemy, I do prefer a Ben Johnson, but I would love it if somehow Ben Johnson becomes head coach and Eric Bieniemy is willing to remain as an offensive coordinator. I think that would be a wonderful combination, because I love Eric Bieniemy's play design, and he just got to work on that play calling a little bit. And then he's had moments, and whenever he wants to run the ball, finally, it looks like this offense is clicking. But and again, we're going to talk about a lot of the things that aren't his fault towards the end of the video. But again, I would hope they can coincide, best case scenario. But if I have to choose between Ben Johnson and Eric Bieniemy, maybe even a couple other guys out there, I'm sorry, man, Eric Bieniemy, you might have to go. But moving on, John Keim also talked about it in his podcast as well, and also basically backed what Grant Paulsen is saying, which is really interesting and very telling. Poor Eric Bieniemy, man. That's crazy to hear. I mean, when we hired him, I thought it was a home run hire. I was super excited coming into the regular season. And again, a lot of things aren't his fault, which we're going to explain again later towards the end of the video. But a lot of things are his fault. I'm not going to take away all the blame from Eric Bieniemy. He's had moments where it's like, boy, this guy's in his bag, but that boy cooking over there. And then he's had moments like, what are we doing? One of my things is probably the thing that I would nitpick the most from him is his 4th and 1 play calling. That's the thing that's been killing me, making me pull out my hair watching Commanders game. That's probably my biggest problem with him. But as far as developing Sam Howell and the play designs and turning Brian Robinson into what statistically looks like a top 5, at very least top 10 running back in the NFL, those are all very noticeable. But at the same time, a lot of our receivers are having down years, which is not his fault much at all. Some of it may be his fault, but a lot of it is just on the receivers not playing well. Again, we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. Now, moving on, Grant Paulsen also tweeted out after this report came out. He said, to be clear, I think EB has done a good job developing Howell. I completely agree. Also love how much he throws in the first half and on early downs. I also agree with that. And Eugene Shin is going to also do a lot of that. You'll see why on November 30th on my birthday. I'd even say he is worthy of a head coach shot in the near future, but I continue to hear that players don't like his old school style. So it's not even like the offensive part. It's not the game planning. It's not the strategy. It's not the offense in totality. It's his coaching style. So the way he yells at players, he gets on them. It's the hard coaching that a lot of players were saying before he got here that they wanted to be coached hard. And then after we hired him, they were like, yay, we're finally going to be coached hard. And then apparently some players just don't like it. They're not responding well to it. I think some players it brings the best out of them. I think some other players it probably brings the worst out of them. It's not the safest. It's the like high risk, high reward type of coaching style. And like I said, even before the season started, when you're winning, that coaching staff can get the most out of players. As long as you're winning, players don't mind you yelling at them and nagging at them for every little thing. But when you start losing, it's like, man, I don't even want to hear that, bro. Like, we're not even going out there to win right now. I'm just trying to chill, maybe get some of my individual stats up so I can look good for another team or maybe even this team to get a new contract. But all that yelling and do stuff over and over again, being real specific and detailed with everything that we do and being 100% expecting greatness out of us every play, every time. When you're losing, you just don't want to hear none of that. So I completely disagree with the players on that. I want a hard coaching coach here, but I'm just saying that it works way better when you're winning than when you're losing. And now that we're doing a lot of losing, that's probably why the players feel that way. But even then, before the regular season even started, some players were coming out and saying that they didn't like the coaching style. And even back then, I was like, man, them players are just weak, because you just don't know how to handle hard coaching. You need to be better prepared mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I felt like Eric Bieniemy was doing a good job of that, because I felt like, if anything, our coaching styles have been too soft recently, and that's why we were losing a lot of games. Then here comes Eric Bieniemy doing what I feel like, what I felt like at least before the regular season started, bringing his hard coaching to fix the team. And it's not all his fault. A lot of it's Jack Del Rio, which is why he got fired. A lot of it's individual players, whole position groups and things like that. But since Eric Bieniemy's gotten here, we got even worse. I'm not blaming him at all, but it's apparently just it's not working enough to carry the team. I know that. And again, if you're losing, that coaching style can get on a lot of players' last nerve. When you're winning, it works. They can deal with it. They're like, well, at least it's producing results type of thing. But when it's not producing results on the field, and again, a lot of it is not Eric Bieniemy's fault, but players just don't want to hear none of that, man. I mean, it's just crazy too, because a lot of people are trying to blame Terry McLaurin for some things. So shouts out my boy Indy Skins fan for bringing this up. Let me calm people coming after Terry. He's on pace for 85 receptions, 1,000 yards in the season. His yards per catch are down partially due going from Eric Coryell offense to a West Coast offense. Good point. And he had turf toe early, and that can linger. No idea if that's impacting his routes right now. And it's really interesting because he shows the data and everything. And I mean, if we're going yards wise, he's pretty much technically kind of on pace to get the same amount of yards, even though his per reception stats are down. Overall yards for the season, he's not terribly far off. But the fact that he hasn't had a 100-yard receiving game yet is insane. That's definitely a negative on Eric Bieniemy right there. But again, we're going to talk about some of the excuses later for why the offense hasn't worked so well under Eric Bieniemy. But one big negative, one obvious difference going from Scott Turner to Eric Bieniemy, or really just from the 2022 Commanders to the 2023 Commanders, is that all of our receivers have been far less productive, especially on a per snap basis than they were. They just seem like they're not separating. They're not catching anything. I don't know what it is. Maybe the hard coaching has them nervous and they're not performing because they're overthinking things because of the hard. I have absolutely no idea what's going on, but the stats are the stats. Now, when it comes to the mixed bag, it's really interesting because Sam Howell is one of the top passing leaders in the NFL, but that's also because he has the most attempts and the most passing yards, which is really interesting. He has the most passing yards simply because he has the most attempts, but he's only 10th in touchdowns and at the same time tied for first in interceptions. I think he wasn't even tied for first until all of those interceptions that just happened on Monday night. Maybe he was, I don't know. I'm not sure if that was allowed those guys to catch up because my boy Justin Fields has missed actually a few games this season, so I doubt it's because of him. Maybe it's because of Josh Dobbs out there throwing a whole bunch of interceptions. Either way, after going on that tangent, Sam Howell is tied for first in interceptions thrown out of the entire NFL with 13. So that's like kind of a mixed bag of good and bad. Also, before that Cowboys game, I thought this was really interesting. Sam Howell versus the Giants and Bills. That's 3 games. He had a 62 completion percentage. Sam Howell versus everybody else through 8 games, a 68.4 completion percentage. So more than 6% completion percentage better versus anybody, as long as you're not a team in New York. And we got to play the Jets later on, so I don't know if it's just New York is just Sam Howell's kryptonite. We'll see when we play the Jets. Also, against the Giants and Bills, he averaged 224 yards per game. Against everybody else, he averaged 295, almost 300. Like literally more than 70 yards more per game. That's amazing. Against New York teams that he's played so far, 5.8 yards per attempt. Against everybody else, 7.3 yards per attempt. And then the touchdown to interception ratio is crazy, dog. Against New York teams, 2 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Against everybody else, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Complete opposites, like complete opposite sides of the spectrum. Like goes from terrible quarterback to great quarterback. It's amazing. Against New York teams, the Giants and the Bills again, 52.1 passer rating in 3 games. Over the course of 8 games versus everybody else, a 101.6 passer rating. Again, this is before that Cowboys game. So I don't want to just throw the Cowboys game out, but that's just an interesting stat breakdown that, is that Eric Bieniemy's fault? Is that Sam Howell's fault? Is that a collection of a lot of people's faults? A lot of different things factor into that? Yes, but that's really interesting that, I don't know if that's good or bad on Eric Bieniemy's part, that Sam Howell just has a strong New York weakness right now. It's a pretty small sample size, but that's incredible. Not gonna lie, man. Let's take a look at a lot of really interesting rankings for Sam Howell right now, though. Like as far as pass attempts, he's number 1. Deep ball attempts with 51. He's number 1 as well. Team pass plays per game, he's number 1 with 40.2. Is that a good thing from Eric Bieniemy? I'm not sure. To trust your technically rookie quarterback to lead the league in passing attempts is really interesting, but he's also leading them in yards, so at least it's not going for nothing. But at the same time, it's not like he's leading them he's 7th in touchdowns, which is really interesting. He's number 1 in interceptable passes, along with number 1 in actual interceptions, so that's really interesting. He's been pressured the most on the 5th most on his throws. He's number 1 in money throws though with 23. So that boy Sam Howell has the highest ceiling, but also being tied for the most interceptions and also leading the league in interceptable passes with 22 is like a very high risk, high reward guy. He's very volatile right now. He's leading the NFL in air yards with 3,320 and also leading the NFL again in passing yards with 3,038. Efficiency wise, it's not that great, and this is when we start to look at Eric Bieniemy a little weird, because it's like, yeah, he's leading the league in a lot of passing stats, but if we're looking at efficiency, he's 21st in yards per attempt, he's 24th in adjusted yards per attempt, 22 in air yards per attempt, but he's 7th in best ball points added according to playerprofiler.com, the way that they rank it. He's 20th in fantasy points per drop back. He's 9th in fantasy points per game though, so that's really interesting. Going on with efficiency as well, according to Player Profiler, he's the 13th most accurate quarterback. He's 12th in true completion percentage, which is really interesting. If you like take out the fact that when he's like throwing the ball out of bounds because nobody's open, and actually like make it a true completion percentage and not just the base stats where you don't do a deeper dive, he's actually better. And he's 12th in the NFL. Deep ball completion percentage, he's 22nd. Not terrible, but pressure completion percentage, when he's pressured, he's 3rd in the NFL in completion percentage while pressured. So that boy's a dog there. We got to give Sam Howell, Eric Bieniemy credit for that. But at the same time, play action completion percentage, he's dead last in the NFL at 46.9%. We got to work on that. If we're looking for an area of improvement for Sam Howell, that's the one right there. That's insane. Red zone completion percentage, 19th in the NFL. Got to work on that. And also clean pocket completion percentage, he's 19th. So he seems to even though he's technically worse percentage wise while being pressured than clean pocket, he's third in the NFL while pressured completion percentage, but 19th when he has a clean pocket. So I don't know. He's just a playmaker, man. He's a really interesting guy, dog. Just a really interesting dog. And true passer rating wise, he's 19th. QBR wise, he's 21st. So again, he's leading the NFL in passing yards. He's top in a lot of base stats like touchdowns thrown, big deep balls thrown and stuff like that. But when it comes to efficiency, he's not looking as elite as it seems. But I still think he's a really good quarterback. I think he has a lot of things that can make him an elite quarterback. But you got to remember, a lot of passes have been dropped by receivers. Receivers haven't been getting as open as they're supposed to be. So we kind of got to give Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy a little leeway there. Just to continue more stats if you want them. Versus man coverage throw rate, he's 40.8%, 25th in the NFL. We're going to go ahead and skip that. Actually, completion percentage versus zone, he's 19th in the NFL. Passer rating versus man, he's 27th. Passer rating versus zone, he's 24th. Accuracy rating versus man, he's 14th. And accuracy rating versus zone, he's 13th. So really interesting, man. He's 9th in the NFL out of quarterbacks with 2 rushing touchdowns. That's pretty interesting. So, hey, man, I mean, there's some up and downs there. There's some elite stats there. And there's also some glaring, like, whoa, we got to work on that. Like, for him to be the worst quarterback, or at the very least 32nd. Technically not the worst because several quarterbacks have started for other teams, so that kind of throws off the stats. But he's 32nd in completion percentage off of play action. If that's the one thing, hey, Eric Bieniemy, one thing you may want to work on for the remainder of the season, these last few games, is to get Sam Howell to improve there, and maybe that will help your case, but for being potentially the head coach of the Breaking and Gold moving forward. We'll see. At the very least, getting like a 1-year trial period under Josh Allen and, Josh Harris, and Eugene Shin. Now let's get to the pure good. That's just nothing but good, and this is definitely an Eric Bieniemy thing. Now, even though our wide receivers have seemed like they've taken a step back statistically under Eric Bieniemy, the running backs have exploded. Brian Robinson right now, according to Pro Football Focus, has the 4th best run block grade right now. He's 4th in receiving yards out of all running backs. He's 5th in 10-plus yard runs out of all running backs, and he's 8th in yards after contact out of all running backs. And that last stat is the only one that's like pure him. Everything else, you can give a lot of the credit to the O-line. You can also give a lot of the credit to Eric Bieniemy. So Brian Robinson is at worst 8th in a lot of important running back stats in NFL. And he's 5th and 4th for some of them. So, hey, man, Eric Bieniemy deserves a lot of credit for that. For Sam Howell's development, the fact that he looks like a professional quarterback, even if you don't feel like he's a franchise quarterback, he at the very least looks like a professional one. But I feel like he has the tools to be a franchise quarterback once we put the right stuff around him. Get him an elite tight end and a really good O-line, an elite left tackle to block for him. I can't imagine what the type of points per game Sam Howell can put up. Now moving on, and I know gotta preface this with the fact that these are excuses, and excuses a lot of the time are not acceptable. But at the same time, man, we got to talk about the fact that he does have band-aids on the O-line, and the only guy that's his guy is Andrew Wiley. Everybody else is Ron Rivera, whoever else, and he's having to just piece this all together and formulate an offense around it. And you could tell by how much Sam Howell was getting sacked early on that Eric Bieniemy wants to do longer drop backs and attack deep down the field, but between receivers not separating and our offensive line not being able to block long enough to achieve that, Eric Bieniemy has had to basically throw out half of his playbook, just completely rip it up and just set it on fire. And we've had to stick to a lot of quick game stuff. Or if we do take deep shots, it's one of those things where Sam Howell is throwing it before the receiver's even possibly open, just beginning his route. He's throwing it deep down the field to a spot, and hopefully the receiver gets there in time to catch it, and hopefully he's open by then. It's not like Sam Howell has the time to sit back, let a deep route develop, and then watch it and then throw it. No, he has to throw it 1-2, throw it up in the air, lob it up there, and just hope he gets there by the time the receiver's there and he's able to make the catch. So the playbook is very limited just off of the fact that the O-line, even though they have improved throughout the season, as the season's gone on, especially run blocking wise, they've gotten pretty good run blocking wise. But pass blocking wise, it hasn't been the best. And of course, a lot of it is also Sam Howell's fault, which takes me to the point that even though Sam Howell, I feel like he's shown a lot of traits and flashes to be a franchise quarterback, especially if we choose to build around him this entire offseason, spend these 3 top 40 picks picks, 5 top 100 picks to basically surround him with talent, even if it's the defensive side of the ball. Making your defense better helps your offense and your quarterback because they get the ball more often to get into a rhythm and do what they got to do, and allows them to potentially score more points. I say you build around Sam Howell. But at the same time, man, this is still technically a rookie quarterback, a redshirt freshman, if you want to say, because he only started one game last year. Through 12 weeks of this 2023 season, going into week 13, he has now started 13 games. That's not even an entire rookie season. And also, you got to remember, this is his third offense in 3 years. And Sam Howell has far surpassed any of my expectations as far as understanding this offense and getting it down. I feel like, you can talk about a lot of negatives with Sam Howell so far this season, but one thing, it's never felt like, oh man, he clearly does not understand the offense. That boy picked it up that fast. And just to think, 2 years ago, he was at UNC running a certain offense. Last year, he was for the Commanders running the Scott Turner offense, again, Eric Coryell based. And now he's running the Eric Bieniemy offense, that's very Chiefs West Coast offense based. He's had to basically run 3 completely different offenses in 3 years, in a less than 3 year span. Remember UNC, especially his senior year, he was running the ball almost as much as he was throwing it. He's had to completely, his brain has to be somewhat scrambled, and for him to go out there and not make it seem like it is, shouts out to him. Shouts out to Eric Bieniemy for doing what he had to do to make it easier for Sam Howell. Maybe he simplified things to make things easier for him. We don't know. We're on the outside looking in for a lot of things, so that's an excuse in itself. There's Sam Howell's sack problem. A lot of it was O-line, but a lot of it was also Sam Howell, and he's gotten better with that going further into the season. He still has his occasional problems where he's holding on to the ball too long, or he's literally running into sacks where if he just would have stayed still in the pocket, he would have been straight. That's not Eric Bieniemy's fault. And also, receivers not separating as well as expected is really a problem right now. They're getting open occasionally, but between the offensive line not giving Sam Howell long enough to allow these receivers to get more open, to allow the routes to, get further into their route process and things like that. Also, they're just not separating as much in general as I expected, and how much it felt like they separated last year. Again, like we spoke about briefly, maybe Terry McLaurin has a little bit of a turf toe situation still bothering him. I don't know what's going on with Jahan Dotson and all these other guys. And then to make matters worse, everybody's dropping passes. Terry McLaurin, and we've known him as a body catcher since he got here, but he tends to make the clutch catches. He's even dropped more passes than I expected. Jahan Dotson, our first round pick, where it's like, okay, I know George Pickens is more talented. I know Jamison Williams is more talented, but we're going to trade back to get out of him. Chris Olave, you could argue, was more talented. A lot of receivers were more talented, but we went with Jahan Dotson because he's the safer bet. The route runner that can separate, and the guy that catches everything thrown towards him. When in doubt, he's those two things. He has not been that this year. I don't know what's going on. I still believe in him. I hope he works out. But Jahan Dotson dropping passes, De'Ami Brown dropping touchdowns, Byron Pringle even dropped a couple, Jamison Crowder dropped some really bad passes. I remember one vividly against the Seahawks. We've just had a problem with drops this year as well. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're not used to Sam Howell delivering it with so much strength and throwing bullets at their hands, and where Taylor Heineke was throwing paper airplanes, so it kind of floated to him. But at the same time, they were hospital balls. They got there so late, things floated so long that by the time you caught the ball, you were getting hit stick by a DB or a linebacker or something. Sam Howell, you don't have to necessarily worry about getting hit sticked as soon as you catch the ball, but catching the ball may be a little bit more difficult. I don't know. But either way, between the O-line, the quarterback taking sacks that he shouldn't, and maybe not reading the field, staring down receivers like he did in that Cowboys game, even though I still believe he's potentially a franchise quarterback, I'm just trying to present all of the reasons why, even though Eric Bieniemy has not been, I'm going to say it again, to isolate him from everything else, he still hasn't been as good as I expected this season. But a lot of these excuses are actually good excuses as to why this offense hasn't produced as much. And then again, wide receivers not separating as much as we expected, and they're dropping a lot more passes than I expected coming into the season. I thought we would have arguably the most underrated wide receiver position group in the NFL. I thought that would probably be top 5. They don't even barely look like bottom 5 right now. It's bad, man. I don't know what happened. Somebody space jammed their powers away. But either way, again, back to my main point, poor Eric Bieniemy, because a lot of this isn't his fault. A lot of it is, but a lot of it isn't, man. But again, even beyond just the lack of offensive production and how Eric Bieniemy hasn't met the expectations that a lot of us had for him coming into the season, the players aren't necessarily mad at that, at least according to Grant Paulsen and John Keim. The players are more so mad at his coaching style. So Maybe if he would have changed that these last few games, and after hearing that, maybe taking some input back from the players, maybe then they'll give him a glowing endorsement. It doesn't sound like it's X's and O's. It sounds like it's off the field practice, motivation, emotional and mental stuff, and his coaching style more than like the actual strategy and offense part of it. And he's the offensive coordinator, so you would think that's all that matters, but everybody's human beings, so apparently that's not all that matters. If I were in NFL, it wouldn't matter to me, so I don't really get it, but I'm trying to be sympathetic towards it for those guys that just don't like it for some reason. Again, I can understand the nagging part, but even before the fact that the season started, before the season even started, some people were complaining about it. I didn't like that. I understand while losing you don't want to deal with it, but before the season even started, that's wild to me. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, be on the lookout for so much more content. And of course, now that the YouTube channel is back in full power, y'all can donate through Super Chat. Y'all can donate directly through YouTube, the different ways that y'all do that. You can become a channel member, and I'm working on exclusive footage for y'all, working on some like film sessions and things like that that will only be available to y'all, and different concept videos that are going to be really interesting and fun. So stay tuned for that and become a channel member if you haven't. And of course, definitely make sure you don't leave this video without leaving a like, because that's free. But if you want to donate, we still have the Super Chat, the Cash App, PayPal, all of that information is in the description of every video, this video included, every live stream, all of that. But also, I want y'all to get in that comment section. Let me know how you feel about this report. Do you believe it? First of all, does it sound realistic? Does it sound like something that may be true? And then if it is true, or even if it isn't, how do you feel about all of the other stuff I presented to y'all, the stats about how Eric Bieniemy's doing? Do you prefer to replace Eric Bieniemy, or like do you prefer to bring in a Ben Johnson or somebody else as a head coach rather than Eric Bieniemy? All of that type of stuff. So let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video, man. I'm gonna keep y'all entertained. I'm coming with daily uploads, so stay tuned. Without further ado, I'm gonna catch y'all later. Be on the lookout for that November 30th on Thursday, 3 p.m. premiere live video stream coming for Eugene Shin breakdown. Catch y'all later. I'm out.